there are significant movements towards renewable energy. Industries are leading the way to, reduce emissions. But for existing businesses, especially SMEs, this transition can be extremely daunting. So, what are the practical steps that they can take to align with the net zero goals? And can government policies and initiatives support them in making this shift smoother?
Very good question, Shagun. And government policy is already very, very supportive. The good news is that just like digital technologies, right? So every MSME today needs to adopt digital technologies, use UPI, do all their banking online, do all their accounts on a computer. So most MSMEs have digitized. Why? Because it increases their productivity and enables them to make more money and makes their life easier. So they've all automatically adopted digital technologies because they're more productive. The good news is today that green technologies are actually more productive and better than brown technologies. So today, if you have a two-wheeler, a scooter, or a motorcycle, it's actually cheaper for you to use an electric scooter than to use a petrol scooter. Similarly, if you're using a bus, it's actually cheaper for you to use an e-bus than to use a diesel bus. Similarly, on solar power. So solar power today, round the clock solar is now almost exactly the cost of coal, maybe a little bit more, but those prices are falling very, very quickly. So the good news for all businesses, not just small businesses, is that it is in their economic interest. They will make a lot more money. They will be much more productive if, in fact, they adopt these green technologies. Now, obviously, when you switch from one technology to another, you have to incur certain expenditures. So, for example, if you get rid of your petrol scooter and buy an electric scooter, you're going to have to pay for the electric scooter. So nobody does this when they have to junk their petrol scooter. So nobody's going to take, if they bought a scooter for 80,000 rupees, 1 lakh, nobody's just going to put it on the junk heap and buy an electric scooter, even if it was cheaper. Only when they have to replace their petrol scooter, that's when they will go and look at, okay, should I buy an electric scooter or a petrol scooter? And they'll find that the electric scooter is much cheaper than a petrol scooter. And that's actually what's happening. So as time goes by, as people replace their existing technologies, which is the standard replacement process that happens in any economy, they will, because of simple economics, simple profitability, adopt the green technology, adopt the electrified technology rather than the fossil fuel technology. And we are already seeing that replacement process go on. The government is providing a lot of support for that. In renewables, we have the Solar Energy Corporation of India. We've got PLIs, production linked incentive programs that support manufacturing of solar cells in India, manufacturing of batteries in India, and so on. So there are many policies that support green technologies. And the good news now, Shagun, is when you go to buy your next car or your next two-wheeler, you will look at the economics and you will buy it. For instance, if you look at the deal that is being offered today by MG Motors, they are basically saying that if you have a car, a petrol car that's costing you 10 lakh, the electric car will also cost you 10 lakhs. And you will have to pay a per kilometer charge for the battery. And that per kilometer charge of the battery, including also the charging of your battery, is actually far lower than the per kilometer charge of taking a petrol car and putting petrol in it. So what happens therefore is that if you're spending 10, 15 rupees per kilometer for a petrol car, you will be spending 5 or 6 rupees per kilometer, including the battery charges and the charging of the battery relative to a petrol car. So already the economics are very much in your favor for you to buy an electric car because of this pricing model that MG Motors has brought in. So these are the kinds of pricing approaches that people are following, where the much lower cost of electric vehicles is being made obvious to consumers, and then consumers are buying it.
You were talking about solar energy, Mr. Sinha. I would like to talk about Zandu, for example. This is an Indian startup that is making solar energy affordable for homeowners and SMEs with its easy installations and smart home integration. What can we learn from startups like these about building effective business models, and how can these be scaled across industries?
Shagun, thank you very much for bringing up India's green startups. In fact, I have a book that I have just written about India's green startups, and Zanroop is an example of one of those very innovative startups. And
Excellent.
actually, the climate battle, India's and the world's climate battles, will be won or lost by India's green startups. I genuinely and seriously believe that. And the reason is that if we can get green startups like Sunroof, like Blue Smart, like Battery Smart, like Electric Pay, like Zero Cow Factory, there's a whole range of these fantastic green startups that are scaling up rapidly right now. If these startups are successful, they will put India on the path to decarbonization and net zero, because decarbonization is their business model. And the faster we adopt them and the faster they scale up, the faster that we will get to net zero. And if India gets to net zero, the planet gets to net zero.
The green innovation landscape has already made significant progress. Like you said, battery storage, renewable energy, and there's also the National Green Hydrogen Mission. So these innovations, do you think that which of these do you see having a big impact in the coming decade?
They will all have tremendous impact, Shagun. And really, to think about India's net zero journey, there are four aspects to this journey. So think of it as a car with four wheels, right? So there are four wheels, and for the car to move forward, each one of the wheels has to spin very, very quickly. And what are the four wheels? Number one, we have to take our power system, our electricity, and convert it completely to green electricity, which means solar, which includes wind, and it includes nuclear as well. So we have to convert that completely over to renewables, number one. Number two is transportation. We have 250 million vehicles in India, and they account for some 20% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So what we have to do is we have to convert all of them into electrified vehicles. So that's the second wheel that has to spin. The third wheel that has to spin, and this is the green hydrogen part, is biofuels of various kinds. So in certain applications, like for example, trucks, for example, planes, it's very difficult to switch away from fuels because they are very dense and very efficient from an energy generation point of view. We will need sustainable aviation fuels, we'll need biofuels, we'll need hydrogen, and so on. So biofuels of various kinds are very, very important. And then the fourth wheel of this journey, the fourth wheel on this journey is to be able to create a carbon market in India which can accelerate industrial decarbonization and decarbonization in the real estate sector. So if we can get a carbon market working in India where we can price carbon and then link it into a global carbon market, and the latest COP actually came up with a breakthrough in reconciling global carbon markets. If we can get a carbon market working well for India, that will help us in many, many other sectors. So for the foreseeable future, for the next 20 years, the four wheels that will drive our decarbonization journey: number one, we have to go to renewables in our electricity. Number two, we have to completely go towards e-mobility, which, by the way, is trillions and trillions of dollars. Number three, biofuels. Number four, carbon market. These are the four big wheels that will drive our decarbonization journey.
Mr. Sinha, I hear you talk about renewable energy, but today coal accounts for 70% of the country's electricity generation. That is a lot of ground to cover. That's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yes, that is correct, Shagun. So 60 to 70% of our electricity generation, the energy, is actually coming from thermal sources, primarily coal. Having represented Hazaribagh, which is one of the largest coal mining areas in India for 10 years in the Lok Sabha, I do understand fully the coal economy and the challenges of moving from coal. The good news is that we have 45 years to do that in, right? So we can take all our existing coal plants, all our existing coal mines, and retire them over the next 40, 45 years. But what is equally important is that while we are using our existing coal assets and retiring them over a period of time, we have to build up our renewables very, very quickly. So tremendous investments are required on the renewable side so that we can basically retire out our coal assets and, in fact, increase our renewable assets. Today, a third of our greenhouse gas emissions, as I said, remember, we are 7% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, which is about 3.5 billion tons of greenhouse gases that we put out, carbon equivalent tons as they're called. Of that 3.5 billion tons, a third, a little over a billion tons is actually coming from just thermal power production, just coming from the use of coal for our electricity. So if we can bring down that carbon emission, that will count tremendously towards our decarbonization journey. And the answer there is to retire the coal and to build up our renewables.